Hello and welcome to the LzLabs Innovation Event. I am Corinne Armani and I'm leading the marketing department at LzLabs. I'm delighted to see 300 attendees from all over the world and we have an action-packed agenda. Today we talk about upcycling, freedom of choice and agility. After this short introduction, we are heading right into a panel discussion where we host extraordinary individuals from the banking, consulting, and IT industry. We discuss how existing systems and processes can perform in the modern world and lead to a competitive advantage. This session is moderated by Julian, who has over 25 years of experience in leading global technology communication. The panel is followed by a product demonstration powered by Tobias Braun, our head of pre-sales. We asked him to hold a technical demo without being too technical, and he came up with a very entertaining solution. So stay tuned. You sense it. Today, we talk about legacy applications in a creative way. We focus on how to upcycle and reuse them. Why am I showing bananas now? I was shocked reading that in the UK, 1.4 million of edible bananas go to the waste bin every day. This is about £8 million worth of goods, and I could not believe that we are unable to produce something else out of these bananas to create value for society. Well, it turns out that I was not the only one, as banana bread was the most Googled recipe in the year 2020. What we are talking about here is taking an investment from the past and create value for today and for the future. It is very similar to what we do with legacy applications. They are the backbone of many players in the industry, and we take those investments and make them perform in the modern world. This means you can accelerate in the market. Let's talk about experience for a second. All of us have gone through our careers, having contributed to successful and probably also less successful projects, and all of us have a backpack full of experience and knowledge carrying with us. And this also holds true for the companies that we work for. Many of these companies have a significant footprint in their industries and have been around for years and years. So have their IT systems and their underlying processes. In the data-driven world we live in today, every line of code holds knowledge. And for the first time in history, these companies are enabled to take the accumulated knowledge that they have built in the past and let it perform in the modern world. With the software-defined mainframe, we enter the circular economy where we create and increase value based on what exists. We take what you have and we upcycle it. Zero waste created. It's basically what happens in other industries also, such as creating furniture from pallets, for example. I mentioned earlier that we are speaking about upcycling, freedom of choice, and agility today, and we have seen that the software-defined mainframe moves workload from the past into the modern world. Now, let's talk about freedom of choice. Different people like different snacks. Similarly, our customers like freedom of choice when choosing how to manage their technology. We enable that choice. We believe in the power of open and having a choice truly opens the path for innovation. You are not restricted, you don't have to rely on a certain process. You can listen to your customer, may there be internal or external, and produce products and features that they will love. Having a choice gives you a competitive advantage because your mind is free. Your mind is free to create. So, we have spoken about upcycling and freedom of choice. Let's move to agility. Using the software-defined mainframe means that you can break down your experience in movable parts. You suddenly can copy and test and break and rebuild like you would do when playing with Lego. Agility is key in this ever-changing world. If you fail to transform your business or your products, you risk to go extinct. Now, taking all this experience you accumulated in the past and transform it at the speed of how the market develops gives you the foundation to expand your footprint in the industry. Agility is actually the driver of why our customer, BPER Banca, moved onto our platform. And with that, we dive into the world of banking. We are now moving into the panel discussion led by Julian. Julian is a man who has an abundance of positive energy, and I'm looking forward to a vibrant discussion. Julian, the stage is yours. Enjoy.
Thanks, Corinne. I'm truly fascinated by the combination of bananas, broccoli, and donuts you've shown us today, and the potential they have to deliver on this promise of application upcycling, the freedom of choice, and the DevOps agility that every professional IT department seeks. To understand how this eclectic mix comes together to integrate legacy and cutting-edge applications, we brought together an illustrious panel of IT industry experts today to discuss the opportunities that can be realized and how the transformation needs to be approached. I'd like to very briefly introduce your panel to you, starting with Omar Campana, who is the Group CIO of BPER Banca in Italy. Omar is a CIO who has already taken the road to the software-defined mainframe, and will be able to share his experience of that with us. He has led many successful digital transformation and legacy transformation projects, and is creator of his company's IT Innovation Lab program. He has also led the recent initiative to migrate core banking applications to the LzLabs software-defined mainframe. Second in our panel today is Thilo Rockmann. Thilo has led the charge and serves as the CEO of LzLabs. He has more than 20 years experience in the information and communication technology industry and served in leadership roles with Accenture, Sun Microsystems, and EasyNet. And Thilo very famously coined the very phrase software-defined mainframe, so he is an expert on whom we can rely. Next, we have Stephan Murer. Stephan is an undisputed technology industry expert and has held senior positions as a chief architect and CTO at companies including UBS and Credit Suisse, with responsibilities for global architecture, technology, and information management. Stephan serves on a number of technology company boards, runs his own business, and teaches universities. The final member of our panel today is Jürgen Pinkl. Jürgen is managing director at Accenture and the company's technology business across the Austria, Switzerland, and Germany region, covering the company's full range of systems integration, application outsourcing, and infrastructure services. Jürgen is passionate about new technologies and is very involved in driving innovation in Accenture's technology as his main priority. This panel will be discussing the issues in front of us for how legacy and cutting-edge applications can be integrated. And at the end of this discussion, we will be taking some questions from the audience. if you would like to submit a question, there is a button on your Zoom screen that should be visible as long as you're not in full screen. If you are in full screen, I'd urge you to come off that and to click the big red button that says submit questions, and that should take you through to an interface where those questions can be written. So, having done the introductions, I'd like to start with our first question to the panel, which is what the drivers are behind legacy and cutting edge application integration, and why we should care so much about this. So I'd like to put this to the panel. If I could start with Thilo and to get your thoughts on this as to why this area is so important.
Sure, happy to. Welcome and thanks for inviting me to this panel. Obviously, the number one driver that is behind all this is the business itself. The business are constantly evolving and they demand changes to the environment. Obviously, innovation without having some experience in how to do things will be very hard. So having legacy systems and trying to innovate just as if there's a blank field will be quite a catch-up game first, and just to make sure that the initial applications or the new applications does what the old applications did. And on top of that, of course, there is going to be quite a bit of resistance by the people that actually are going to use it, because we are human beings and human beings don't really like that much change. So the ability to preserve the investments made in the applications and yet trying to utilize that to innovate is huge, which also can be seen in things like the service-oriented model in the past or many other microservices initiatives that are on the way right now. This is at the core of LzLabs, of course, because we're trying to get some of those legacy systems into that mix in an easy way. Of course, ultimately, the business case needs to stack up. There's an upskilling element to it. And last but not least, of course, the time to market is a big driver too.
Thank you, Thilo. So if we could turn now to Omar. What are your thoughts? What were your drivers? You've obviously already been through this process. What drove your initial sort of desire to have integration between legacy and cutting edge systems?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. My pleasure to be here as well. Well, that's of course is a question that has some story behind it. Well, I have to say honestly that when we talk about the integration, and so we discussed the fact that we need to have legacy systems on one side and the distributed system on the other side. Here, the key word is coexistence. What I mean is that I think that in our role as a technology expert in the technology field, we need to we have the mission to look for in advance and for the at least 15 or 20 years. And if you think to that scenario, of course, we can imagine that the two different types of technology will coexist, will stay together. And in this extent, what we have done was to try to innovate or think in a different way in which we can combine together the two technologies. And then that's why we started to investigate and to explore a new way to combine the legacy technology with the distributed one. And of course, this has very strong technical elements. So I think it's quite easy to imagine that there is different steps for this journey. And I think that one of the key steps that we took at the beginning was to start with the exploration from a technology point of view, starting with the proof of concept approach, and then leading our team to this journey.
Thank you. That's extremely interesting, and we'll come back in a minute to how that's worked out and how those sort of steps played out. Stephan, you've obviously had a lot of experience in different companies that have got probably very large suites of legacy applications, as well as a lot of distributed and cutting-edge systems. What do you see as being the driving forces behind their integration from your point of view?
Well, I mean, it's the pure value that sits in the legacy systems. I mean, they have been built over decades almost. I mean, I've replaced personally, I think the last pure mainframe project I did was replacing a 40-year-old system. So that's so they serve their purpose for very long. Often based on $1 billion or billion Swiss franc, euro, sterling investment. It has proven over and over again in large organizations that these legacy systems cannot really be replaced in one go. It's neither technically nor organization nor economically feasible. So you have to find ways to basically keep that treasure, yet open it up for new requirements. And the new requirements come from various sides. They come from the side of new technical channels. You want to serve, I mean, the first one being serving your services on the internet, but you have today you have mobile, whatever you want. That's one side, APIs and the like. And on the other hand, there are new technologies that give you new possibilities like advanced analytics, machine learning, and so on, things that can't really be done on the old platforms in an efficient way. Then the other pressure comes from the cost side. I mean, running these mainframes is not cheap as platforms. They're relatively expensive for doing the same thing as you could do on other platforms. So you want to basically come off them, save some money, go to the cloud, big trend today. You couldn't do that with the mainframe. That's another thing. The last one is your skills. I mean, your people, with each generation of people, you also come with a new generation of technology. And whilst you still have your legacy alive, when you build new stuff, you couldn't build it in the old way because people wouldn't even know how to do this. So these are reasons why these things are coexistent, as Omar said, and this coexistence has to be organized in a meaningful and efficient way by interfacing those together.
Thank you, Stephan. That's really insightful. I think this balance between the sort of the cost versus the freedom versus the skills is one that we need to explore further. Maybe Jürgen, you can pick up on that. Obviously, you work across a vast number of different companies in your role with Accenture. What have you learned from your clients as to what the driving forces are here?
Yeah, first, thanks very much for having me, and good afternoon. Yeah, as you said, Stephan and my colleagues before answered this very comprehensively already. But from a client's perspective, talking to clients, and actually the COVID situation made this even more important. Most of my clients, would become even more digital. So very often, our clients, many corporations, I mean, a bit kind of black and white, played some form of digital theater. So they digitized on the edges, but, they did not really drive digitization into the core of the organization, into the core of the processes, into the core of their systems. And, the COVID situation made it clear that you only be competitive if you're digital from the core. And that's why, the clients ask us, how do we become even more digital? How do we do this really deeply in our systems? Deeply in the systems, very often there is a mainframe. And, that's why, the focus is on the mainframe again. How do we deal with the mainframe in this next wave of digital transformation? And that's how, that's why that's so interesting again in the moment.
And if I can just, I guess, go one level deeper on that. I mean, a lot of the discussions that are out there today, especially in, say, like the banking area, is that we have startup banks like a Revolut or a Monzo, a Starling, that are coming along. And if you read some of the media, the Financial Times, for example, you might get the impression that they're eating the lunch of traditional banks. How much is that true, that they have an advantage because of sort of, I guess, sort of digital speed that they could operate at, whereas traditional banks are more tied in because of their legacy applications?
So, see, I mean, I think digital speed is an advantage. And if you have a traditional setup in your IT department with your mainframe, maybe you're really at a disadvantage. But then if you in a clever way optimize, modernize your mainframe landscape, if you manage to decouple the existing legacy backbone from the new stuff, a little bit like Stephan said, right, for machine learning and so forth, then you can, very nicely combine best of both worlds. And I don't think the startups do really have an advantage. I think it's not the mainframe per se; it's the way how you, set your system architecture. And if you do it correctly, then it's not a big disadvantage. Maybe it's even an advantage because you have all the investments in those systems already, as Stephan pointed out as well.
That's a point I want to touch on later, is that sort of preservation of investment. But for now, Omar, can I just go back to you, because you've been through this, you are a bank. How much was this your decision to integrate your legacy and your cutting edge systems, your distributed systems? How much of that was driven because of competitive pressures? Was that an issue, or did you see that as being a side benefit, I guess?
Well, Julian, I have to say that from a technological point of view, the decision is typically an IT department driven decision. But on the other hand, from our side, we are just providing an answer to the real demanding point that is coming from our business. Well, in this extent, I think that this is something that I already said a couple of times. Probably if you ask the same question to the other CIOs in the financial department, or maybe in other industries, probably you will find that for everyone in the agenda, of course, with different priorities, but I think that in the top 3 items for the CIO agenda, you will find the time to market need. So in this extent, I think that what we have done was just trying to answer and to provide a new way to provide and to work and to improve our time to market ability in terms of a new product release or evolving the existing products and so on and so forth. So I think that this is, it has been our decision from a technical point of view, from a solution point of view, but of course, the needs coming from the business side.
And I guess I've got to ask the question now. Have you succeeded in reducing that time to market?
Well, I'm quite proud to say yes. Of course, it has been, we are in the middle of the journey, of course, because we didn't complete the roadmap that we drew up and that we established in front of us. But I think that for the first phase, we definitely has been successful in terms of reduce the complexities and improve our ability to speed up the time to market for new products.
Interesting. Okay, fantastic. And I want to put the question in so the other way around, and I'd like to address this to both Thilo and to Stephan, is what are the dangers if you don't take this approach? If you remain with your legacy applications in sort of almost one department and your distributed cutting edge, leading edge applications in another department, if you do keep them separated, where does that end up in your experience? Maybe Stephan, you could go first on this, and I can come to Thilo in a second.
Yeah, ultimately, it paralyzes your ability to deliver new solutions. I would say if you're not able, or it leads, I think this is more on the psychological side, it may even lead to parallel solutions. So people start re-implementing everything that was in the core legacy system in other systems again. So because they can't easily access what is there, or it's very expensive to build the interfaces. So it leads to a lot of redundant functionality, redundant architecture. And this makes things more expensive, makes it slower, and potentially also not functionally as rich. And what you often see in companies that have built their systems or their systems at the fringe in this way is a lack of integration, even felt by the customers. I mean, you probably have been or are still a customer of a bank where what they show you as a balance on the ATM is not the same as they show you on the internet. I mean, this is an outside sign for this kind of problem.
So if that happens, that's a tell, is that? It's a telltale sign that there is no integration if I've got two different balances.
It's actually a sign for a suboptimal integration underneath the hood. Huh? And that's, I mean, this is how you can tell it. I mean, when I have to do a due diligence on a bank or anything, the first thing I do is I become a customer there and make a couple of exercises like this. And then I have a good impression what I'll find later on.
It's also, Stephan, right? I mean, how long it takes to open an account and so forth is also a sign.
Exactly.
It's suboptimal integration.
It's absolutely fascinating. Okay, that is really interesting. Thilo, you've had a lot of experience across a lot of companies who are looking at this transition. Tell us what your thoughts are about sort of the risks if you don't follow down this path.
I mean, clearly, one of the risks is, of course, the more you have, let's say, system breaks in your environment, you end up with what Jürgen and Stephan already alluded to. You have multiple systems to maintain. You have different people to maintain it. You have to think a lot about integration. Ultimately, and that's to Omar's point, it will slow you down because you can't just innovate on one platform and then on the other you have to just integrate it. I mean, it takes time to do that. It will become a holdback if you're not taking care of that and try to consolidate the environments that you have, which is also the point that Jürgen made earlier about the right architecture. If you have the right architecture, if you can break it down into smaller pieces, then you have more flexibility. You can innovate on the things that you really want to innovate, while other things you may not have to touch. But of course, our industry, the IT industry, is fairly young compared to other industries. Of course, and Stephan said earlier that there was 40-year-old applications. So 40 years ago, these applications have been built with a very different thing in mind, different architectures, different thoughts, and it has progressed. We've learned a lot. And of course, that's part of the deal here, that there's a lot of information sitting in there, important investment as well. So trying to get that out and then being able to integrate that into the new worlds, into the new ways of doing, and therefore put you in a better position going forward in light of trying to keep up with the business, which is ultimately what time to market is all about, because the business wants to evolve. It wants to offer these services that the internet banks or whoever ultimately is offering, and without being slowed down or held back by existing environments or existing restrictions. That is the point.
Let me put it another way. Could you be competitive without integrating your legacy and distributed systems in this day and age? I mean, is there an option just to say, no, we carry on doing them separately? Or do you think integration is inevitable if you want to survive? I don't know if anyone wants to pick up on that one.
Happy to pick it up. I think it has been impossible without the integration for a while already. I think the turning point was the necessity to deliver services on the internet. I mean, it wasn't really possible to deliver directly from the mainframe. Some tried, but was always a compromise. So think late 90s, early 2000, everybody had to deliver. That already meant you had to have a core transaction system and you had to have some kind of front-end system that delivers to the internet. And then more and more of these systems on the fringe have been have been added, pieces of the core have been replaced over time by pieces of standard software, software as a service solutions, and so on. But I think if your integration architecture is bad, you wouldn't have survived. It's more than 2 decades now where this has been an ongoing topic. Obviously under different names. I mean, it was enterprise service bus, service architecture, APIs, what have you. I mean, choose your thing, but it's always the same topic.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Maybe just one comment on this, right? The interfaces to end customers is for sure very, very important, and they became, more important basically every year. But then there's also the data part, right? I mean, let's also consider that, more and more data is important. I mean, to access data, to do some intelligence or machine learning on data, this also is probably an extra push for decoupling and having new systems in addition to the mainframe systems. I mean, machine learning on the mainframe, I think, is very, very hard, and I guess my colleagues can confirm.
So you're saying it's not enough to put a skin onto the mainframe application, because I think going back in time, IBM used to put XML schemas on top and JavaScript services and stuff like that, and that rendered a kind of, I guess, a kind of friendlier version of the mainframe application to the external audience. But that sort of veneer approach doesn't work. I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, a skin is not enough. I mean, a skin is only, it does not open you to all those new technologies, right? Combining the services the hyperscalers are offering, doing machine learning on your data and so forth. That's not doable with a skin.
I think in most companies that still have a mainframe today, this is positioned as a core transaction machine, and other things are done elsewhere. I mean, for good reasons. I mean, think of a machine learning application with the amount of data and processing needed. I mean, if you did that on the mainframe, you would probably spend your whole corporate budget on that single mainframe.
Or more.
Or more. I mean, you just couldn't afford to do it. I mean, this is hugely different. I mean, I'll give you an example. I'm on the board of one of these startup internet banks. You believe it or not, we're spending less than a 4-digit number of Swiss francs per month on our cloud bill. Huh? Compare that to your traditional bank.
So it's okay. So if you're not going to do this for sort of functionality reasons, you do it for financial reasons.
Exactly. I mean, that wouldn't even pay for the lunch of your IBM account rep. Huh?
Yeah. Okay. Can I just move on? Talking about the money side, I want to move on to talk about sort of the reasons for sort of upcycling and upskilling within IT departments. Before I do that, if I just remind the audience here today that we would love to hear your questions. There is a question button on the Zoom interface. You do need to come out of full screen in order to see that question button. But if you would like to ask a question to our panel today, we would love it if you did that. Just click the button and that should take you through. So having said that, I'd like to move on and just talk about sort of the investments that have already gone into mainframe applications. These run into tens, hundreds of billions of investment and huge numbers of lines of code. How important is it to preserve that investment and that sort of the foundations of the company that are often sort of encoded within those applications? Maybe Omar, you could start us off by telling us a little bit about BPER and how you view that sort of legacy value there.
Well, that of course is a very sensitive point, I would say, as you mentioned, of course. At the beginning of our discussion, we were mentioning the fact that we have in front of us several years of consistency. So between the two technology, and in this extent, of course, the investment that have been done by the company are crucial. Every company wants to achieve as much as possible from the investment that have been done in such technology. And for this reason, I think that one of the pillars here is the ability to compose and to, again, it's coming back the integration point between the two words. And here, one item that we experienced is really important is the flexibility to combine the services and that are available into the company. From the architectural point of view, I fully agree with what Stephan said about the right architecture. And I think that there are two main drivers or two main points that we, at least in our experience, we leveraged in order to achieve the level of flexibility that we needed. And they were, of course, the automation, because we had to, we are still investing in the most appropriate way to combine and to include together into a continuous integration and a continuous delivery process components, features from the legacy systems and also from the distributed systems. And the other items, which is more methodological point of view, is the parallel stream working. And this is something that I definitely can say from our experience that the advantages that we took from the LzLabs solution, from the SDM, about the parallel stream working, of course, mainly related to the system integration environment, have been very, very consistent, I would say.
Excellent. And in terms of the transition that you went through, can you just give us some idea of the sort of the scale of this? I mean, are you able to sort of to reveal, for example, how many lines of code were involved in these applications, the numbers of people involved, just to give us some sort of idea of what you went through?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's take into account, for example, the last year. I mean, during the last year, we ran through a project that was mainly based on what I was discussing before. So the system integration side, and also into the moving, replatforming part of our code base. And we addressed more than 30 services and in 1 year project, and the number of people involved were around 10-12 people, which are based, of course, on premise. I mean, at BPER side, of course, behind that we had two main partners, which was LzLabs, of course, and CWS as a system integrator. And again, the thing is that we have been able to address the overall 10% of the power in terms of elaboration and the traffic loading that we were running over the mainframe.
Wow. Okay.
It might be worth mentioning as well that you at the same time had to merge other operations from other companies as well. And there was no stopping of any services at any time. You kept developing it while we were moving it as well, which was, I think, to me at least, one of the big highlights in what we've done.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Jürgen, could I bring you in on this question? So the existing setups within many companies that you're dealing with in your client base, to bring their applications, their legacy applications, and I guess the teams that deal with the legacy applications through to a new status where they're part of an integrated applications, integrated teams. How challenging is that from a kind of technical point of view, but also from a kind of human point of view?
Maybe I start with the human point of view, right? I mean, it's actually it's quite an upskilling challenge. You know, very often the teams, you know, taking care of the mainframe systems tend to be, you know, the less kind of younger people, and they tend to be working in the same or with the similar technology for quite some time. But on the other side, very often they are very well educated and have, quite some foundational knowledge. But it's a challenge to train new coding languages, new environments, new platforms. You have to do it. You have to plan for it. It's doable, but it doesn't happen on its own, so to say. Technically, it's a little bit dependent on how you go about it. You could switch to LZ solution, LzLabs solution. We very often advise our clients to first, finalize this decoupling by, separating kind of through a data flow engine like Kafka, the systems. This, a bit dependent on the situation, might have a very quick return on investment, which also shows it's not too difficult to do. So we do have examples where it paid off within, 9 months, a year or so. So technically, dependent on how you go about it, if you want to do the big step directly, or if you do it in a sliced way, it's not that difficult. I think, you need much more focus on training up your people. But maybe Stephan can comment on this as well, because he saw this in action into very large organizations.
Thanks, Jürgen. Yeah, I've gone through this more than once. Dependent on the size of your element, you first have to cut it into pieces. There's no other way to do it, because ultimately, in my experience, a replacement project cannot take longer than 18 months or so. And so you have to cut it into pieces so that you can swallow it within a reasonable time frame. Beyond that, it's very hard to maintain the focus of the organization on that. I'd like to add something on your skills discussion. It is true that obviously people don't have the most modern skills. However, what you find in these teams is enormous business skills. A CEO, Ossi Grübel, once told me, what the big problem is with you guys is you're the only ones who know how the company works, because basically the actual operating model is codified in these systems, and it's nowhere else. And it's only in that places where all that know-how comes together. And I think one shouldn't underestimate the loss of that. I've seen that in many of these outsourcing and India adventures, where a lot of that got lost, and the companies paid dearly afterwards.
Yeah, in fact, I was going to ask, Stephan, it's a question for you, I guess, but it could be for any of the panelists. There was, if I remember, a website that was devoted to failed mainframe upgrade, projects, and it would list them out as being, how much they cost and how long it had been before they failed. I guess my question on behalf of all the audience here is, what's different this time? Because I think we're all sort of, once bitten, twice shy about trying to sort of free up mainframe applications and bringing them into distributed world. How is it different this time?
I think the main thing that is different this time is that you can decouple the platform move from the re-architecture of the application. Essentially what you can do in SDM is you can move the whole thing into a new environment largely without touching the application, and then you can at a different speed and on a different roadmap, you can start taking these things apart and re-architect them or re-platform them even further, or put them into new programming language. But often in these old projects, the issue was you had a very, it's called the big mud ball. You had a very, very deeply integrated architecture, basically everybody writing and reading into the same database. And whenever you pulled on one side, everything came in your direction. And in order to move it to another platform, you either had to move everything or nothing. And this is just too much risk, too much effort, too expensive, not doable skills-wise, not doable under other priorities. That's where these things fail.
So this is almost, what was it, The Little Prince, where you have to eat the elephant, bit by bit.
Exactly.
Is that what you're basically saying? Yes. Okay. Thilo,
may I add something on this, because I definitely agree with Stephan, especially for one point. I think that here one key item is the risk mitigation side. I definitely agree on the fact that since we are in a position in which we can establish a roadmap in which we are able to slice the elephant, as you were saying, I mean, to working for a small piece and address step by step without, and in this case, of course, minimizing the operational risk. I think this is the definitely a real turning point.
So we've got almost what you're saying. We've opened up a route through from the past of legacy applications to the future of integrated applications that enables it to be done sequentially and in a low risk way.
Yeah, in a low risk way, yeah.
I mean, just to make that clear, and that's also partially based on my personal experience being in a CIO role myself in the past, and Omar and I discussed that a lot, and so did Stephan. And I mean, of course, we talked initially about having to innovate and having to do the quickest time to market and getting these new products, new features out at this, which is the business demand, while the risk element is actually something that you do typically because nobody appreciates that actually, because they expect it already done before you can possibly do it, even because you have to codify the business working, as Stephan put it. At the same time, you're of course in that position that if something breaks and everybody takes it for granted that it runs, then you appear in the news, and therefore that is where the risk is. So you got to find the right balance here, moving quickly and moving swiftly, and to a new platform, reskilling, etc., or keeping up with it. It's a constant change anyway, but at the same time, you want to move it as quickly as possible too.
Maybe let me add to this. I mean, the fastest way to terminate your CIO career is a big outage. I mean, you can survive late projects, you can survive overrun budgets, but usually don't survive a big outage.
That's a sobering way of looking at it, Stephan. Thank you. Yes. So if I take this approach of migrating towards the software-defined mainframe, de-risking it, being able to build sequentially, it gives us a way of bringing yesterday's applications, if I can call them that, legacy applications, and maintaining their value and maintaining that investment. Traditionally, the IT industry has been one that has kind of thrown away yesterday's investment very easily. We've seen it in databases, we've seen it in almost every aspect of IT. And it's sort of out with the old and in with the new tends to be the way the industry works. Are we looking at a fundamental change in how IT is going to work as an industry going forward, in that rather than having a disposable IT agenda, we have one that actually looks at building on the foundations of what we had before? Is that possible?
If I may, I mean, there has always been, in IT, there has always been a mismatch between perception and reality in that space. I mean, there's much more older stuff around than people think, but they don't like to talk about it. It's the new shiny stuff people talk about. And I mean, also the term legacy, I mean, nothing becomes legacy if it isn't good for anything. I mean, it's the reason why some piece of code becomes legacy is because it serves the business well. And it has been serving the business well for a long time. I mean, that's the definition of legacy. I mean, no code or no application grows very old if it's useless. And I mean, if you look into even the most, I mean, I've been doing a bit of consulting for Google lately. I mean, what are they, 20 years old today? They have legacy, believe me. And not a little of it.
That's fascinating. I mean, let me bring in Omar to this discussion. Omar, what's your view about is legacy something that is what we buy today?
Well, I was mentioning before that one key word is the consistency. In this extent, we need to think on the fact that in a couple of years ago, in 2019, the COBOL technology, COBOL language, just turned 60 years of activity into the programming world. So it means that at that time, probably right now, the figures are a little bit different, but 2 years ago, there were 220 billion of line of active code in production. And every year there is 1.5 billion of new lines of code created in production environment. So that means that, as I was mentioning at the beginning, we need to think as mid or long term, and we need to think to be able to manage this consistency for the next years, I would say. But it is not just a short time period that we have in front of us.
So it is almost a strategic change, you're saying, in the way that we should regard. Yeah, fantastic. Very interesting. Can I just change tack? I think having looked at sort of this sort of upcycling and how we build on what's been there before, if I can ask you to jump forward into when the integration has been completed, and I guess, Omar, you would be a great place to start with this. What do you see as being the major benefits derived from taking this action and going on the journey towards the software-defined mainframe? I mean, I think we've had various things mentioned today. I think Jürgen, or maybe Stephan mentioned sort of AI and machine learning. Web services certainly comes into it, and the need to have that enacted in a much more purposeful way. But Omar, what from your point of view, for your bank, was the major benefit that you see coming out of this?
Once again, here is coming our ability to improve our time to market. And in this extent, I specifically have in mind the stream we had. We had an internal stream into our project that was dedicated to the system integration side environment. And then in this extent, we've been able to work on one of the topics that I was mentioning before, so the parallel work stream. So we've been able to parallelize our way of working and having, exactly as Stephan was mentioning before, we having the ability to replicate part of the environment and make them working in parallel. And this was really a great achievement, I think, from our point of view.
Okay. Jürgen, can I bring you back into this discussion? I mean, maybe you'd like to give us your view on sort of where the major benefits lie from undertaking this approach.
And I think, having a renewed mainframe infrastructure basically, helps you to create a new digital core for your corporation. New digital core means, you're competitive vis-a-vis the, new entrants. You can, exploit your data. You can collaborate and use services hyperscalers are offering. You can use machine learning, time to market. So, at the essence or in the core, a new digital core is, the cornerstone for becoming a true digital enterprise.
You make it sound like sort of the secret of eternal youth for the IT system.
It's better said, right?
Rejuvenating approach.
Yes. Yeah, and there's one thing which I think, Stephan did put this out, and Omar, I think as well. Legacy will not go away. What we do today is the legacy of tomorrow if you do it good. So, you have to find a way of being, coexistence going forward with what was built yesterday, what's built today, and what's going to build tomorrow. And, with the right architecture, I think, you can actually really do that and exploit your investments and, bank on
so this is an architecture that almost recognizes the realities of how large IT systems are built rather than the myth. I think, Stephan, was your point before. But Thilo, let me bring you in on this. I mean, is what you're doing rejuvenation?
That's a big term and well said. But let me give you a slightly other perspective to this, a little bit more down to earth, to be honest. I mean, obviously, the points that were already made of where the benefits lie, but there's also a side benefit, which I think is equally important, especially when you think about the processes around it, and that lies in the, let's say, in the agile way of thinking and the agile way of working nowadays. Because once you go through that process, you will gain also ability to test and to test more and more efficiently. And therefore really come to a point where you can deliver on the fail fast idea of agile development. So you run this test and you have a shift left testing as well, so you can test earlier. All of that is hard on the main. It's not impossible, it's hard. And as we said earlier, it's going to be very costly to do it if you wanted to. But there are some side benefits that come with that, because you will build these kind of test environments that will help you going forward, that would allow you to go closer to the developers in testing earlier and more efficiently in the integration, which is definitely a benefit which comes on the side of it, which we haven't really touched upon besides the general benefits that have been mentioned.
It's very interesting. So speed of development, speed to market being critical. Stephan, what's your view?
On speed of development, I think Thilo is absolutely right here. I mean, if you look at modern development methods, basically agile development, typically what they need is that each agile team or squad or whatever you want to call it, pick your method, has its own complete environment with the data and everything. They basically can work in isolation and test in isolation, and finally in the DevOps process individually release into production. This is something that is very hard to do on the mainframe, A, because it's too expensive to give an individual machine to every team, and B, it is typically these applications are not properly separated so that they could be easily deployed independently. I mean, the typical way how a large mainframe team works is all the application teams work on their things, and then there is a quarterly release with a big integration test happening, and a lot of prayers sent upwards, and eventually, hopefully on release date, everything works together. I mean, if you look at the incident curves in one of these organizations, I could even show one, is essentially each time, we had 4 releases, and each time after the release, incidents went up, and then things got fixed in production, then incidents went up again after 3 months, and so on and so forth. I mean, this is the way you develop on the mainframe. This is hard. This is not the way you do it today, but economically and technically, it's hard to do it differently on the mainframe, because these systems are so expensive and so tightly integrated.
Fascinating. So it's really overcoming inherent limitations in the mainframe. If you move to the software-defined mainframe, then you take off the restrictions, essentially.
And you can basically afford to give an individual environment to every team. I mean, it's economically doable.
Fascinating. We have time for one more question from me to the panel, and then we're going to turn to questions from the audience. The question I've got is, I think, the one that probably most of the audience members really want to know, which is that if you want to take this journey to the software-defined mainframe, is this the way that large enterprises, which, let's be honest, are the ones that are using mainframes, is this the way that they can level up and be competitive with the much more nimble startups that have no legacy applications and essentially being born on the web? Jürgen, I'm going to go to you first, because you gave me this question earlier, and I think you've got strong views on this, so the platform's yours.
Yeah, I think this is a very good way to do it. Obviously, doing nothing is a recipe for disaster. So you have to start modernizing, start decoupling. Going into a software-defined mainframe, decoupling the infrastructures is the right way. This leads, if done well, to a very nicely structured architecture, which is then exploiting services from outside, as I said before, machine learning or something. This is a very good path into a very modern, very competitive setup. But then obviously, you have to train your people and so on. So it's a large organization, it's a large program, it's a rather complex program, but it's the right direction.
And clearly needs the help of industry experts like yourselves, yes.
A bit of marketing, yes, of course.
I thought that might be in there somewhere. Stephan, is this the great leveling up? Can companies, I mean, you sit on the board of a startup bank, and you clearly work with some very, very large banks indeed. Can a large bank really compete with a startup bank in terms of agility by taking this route?
I mean, let's be honest here, there is no silver bullet. It's one element in an agility strategy, I would say. It's also it's an element we discussed development before. I think development practices are an important piece of becoming more agile. As I try to illustrate, you can improve your development practices on mainframe software the way I explained. This is one element. I mean, let's be very clear, it needs many other elements. It's architecture, it's flexibility of sourcing, it's probably a good cloud strategy today that is important. It's a good data strategy. I mean, it's the balance of all these things that make the thing work. But clearly it's one important element. And if the mainframe is an important element of your overall architecture and still hosts key systems for you, it's something you have to take into account in your strategy, I believe.
Thank you. Thilo, I'm going to come to you next. Omar, I want to hear from you last because you're the represent a company that has done this, and therefore I want to give you the final word. But Thilo, give us your thoughts on does this enable leveling up? Is this where you think the step that can help more established companies to compete with the more nimble?
Of course, I would say yes, but I would follow also the comment that were made earlier. I mean, there is not one solution fits all. I mean, it depends a little bit also on the necessities of what needs to be done. And there's more things that have to be taken into account than just the legacy systems. But all in all, at least I can say that for LzLabs, one of the key things that was driving me was there's a lot of things being taught in universities about how to develop things and everything, but hardly ever is something taken into account on how to deal with legacy. This is definitely a solution that could be a driver here. It's certainly not the only one.
Very much in fair response. Thank you, Thilo. Omar, can I give you the final word? How has this worked out for BPER Banca? Do you find yourselves in a more competitive environment now, having gone through or going through this transition?
Well, I think that just sharing with you, with all the panel and the attendees, some final thoughts about our experience, I can definitely say that from our side, what we learned and what we achieved were two main components, two main elements. One from the technical side, because what we achieved is an additional solution, an additional technology to improve our agility and our flexibility that I was mentioning before. And I definitely agree with Stephan and with other colleagues saying that there is not just one solution that fits all. This is an additional component, and we have been able to prove it that is working. On the other side, I think that from our people perspective, for our team, we have been able to establish and to improve here a new team with the skill up level in terms of methodology and in terms of also with the journey that we are following as a BPER, as an IT BPER, for the full IT DevOps based. So this has been one very consistent achievement again here, that we can say that is a reality from our point of view.
Very interesting and very good to hear. Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for the answering my questions. What I'd like to do now is to open it up to some questions that have been sent in from our audience today. The first question comes from Hakan Nielsen, and Hakan is asking about the response from banks about shifting their workloads from on-premise mainframes to a software-defined mainframe in the cloud. I think, Thilo, this is probably one for you. How do you find people react to this idea of shifting from their own data center to the cloud?
That's an interesting question, because let's say 10 years ago, maybe even 7 or 5 years ago, if we would have touched the bank with the term cloud, they would have run away. But that has shifted completely. So if you're not addressing the cloud today, then it is you basically then they run away by now. Okay. So that is definitely 100%, 180-degree change in my opinion. I think it's a necessity. Yet, of course, again, as said earlier, it's not one solution fits all. Of course, it needs to be well balanced, well found. You're bringing a legacy system which is designed and architected for a different environment into the cloud. It can be done, and it works. We've seen that, but it is, of course, it is not the end point. There are more steps that need to be done beyond this software-defined mainframe. We've mentioned breaking it down, etc., etc. That will help make it possible and then make it really effective in the cloud. Because ultimately, if you also look at it again, a bank is typically not an IT shop, or shouldn't be. They should be busy with doing the business work and finances, or whatever they want to do as a bank. Therefore, I think it's a great thing if they can rely more and more on standard and standardized environments rather than having to do it all themselves in their own data center.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Dennis Bros, and he's asking about, we're making an observation that a lot of the issues with mainframe applications really come down to maintenance issues, solving a technical debt that has been built up over the past sort of years due to missing documentation and so on. And he's making the point that, or asking the question, how does moving these applications to another platform, to the software-defined mainframe, how does that solve these issues? I don't know, Stephan, would you like to give us your view on that?
And it can partly solve it. It's not. I mean, obviously, if you lost all your documentation, even the source code. I mean, I know of mainframe shops that have lost the source code to certain pieces of their environment. Believe it or not, despite all the compliance and all the source code controls and what have you. This is happening. Actually, in this case, SDM is probably your only solution to move, because you can even move something where you have lost the source code. Not something that's not something very good and something you have to address, but you can do that. I would say challenge. I mean, SDM can help you because you have to touch everything. You basically understand what you have. You have to analyze your stuff. You rebuild the knowledge about what you have. But I mean, nobody can replace a piece of lost source code or a piece of lost documentation, which ultimately the source code is. I mean, that's not something you can solve like this.
I mean, if I may add something to it, I mean, you can also put it upside down. I mean, one day you will have to address it one way or the other, because unless you want to go out of business in the very end. I mean, we talk about legacy and the investment made in it and that it drives businesses. So if that goes away, I mean, if you have that situation, you need to address it one way or the other. I believe that the SDM approach is the best way of addressing it with minimal change and minimal risk. There's nothing without risk, but you got to address it one way or the other anyway. So it's not the question whether that solves the question. It is a step in the right direction. It will not immediately solve everything and all the problems that have been created over time, inadvertently in many cases.
Fair enough. We have questions coming from Leyun, who asks, what are the best strategies to decommission mainframes? For example, refactoring, rebuild, replace, and replatform. Jürgen, I think that's a question that I'd like to put to you.
I mean, I guess there is no best. No, I mean, there's only a best in a certain situation, and maybe for a large corporation, you have to follow more than one strategy. I guess, the important thing, the larger the issue is, the more you have to slice it into several pieces, and you address piece by piece. I also do have clients who want to retain the mainframe because, some of the, it's a debt from one side, but it's also an asset on the other side. Some assets are, so, good and so valuable that they want to retain the mainframe. So, retain, rehost, replace, replatform, refactor, reimagine, whatever you do, try to decouple, try to make sure that you can, microservices is kind of the buzzword currently en vogue, and try to cut it in smaller pieces and address piece by piece, searching for the right approach for each individual piece.
Thank you. Stephan, do you want to bring you in on that one? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I would say it really depends on your business case. Generally, I think you will have over time. You probably have a business case to re-platform and really, or I wouldn't say re-platform, basically rewrite the piece of mainframe code in a new architecture. If you really have a lot of business changes, so you really have to re-architect also from a business architecture point of view. However, if you are, say you're in a situation where you have a cloud strategy, by the way, the question before every bank today has a cloud strategy. I've just recently worked with one that tries to shut down their last data center in 2026. So, and this is where re-platform comes in. Where you say, look, guys, we're not going to keep our data center open just because we have one mainframe left. So this is something that has to go because the business case is way too important for that.
Thank you. We have one more question from the audience, and then I'd like you to give a quick summation of what you feel are the priorities, or what you would recommend, I guess, to a CIO or an IT director who is currently running a mainframe. Just a closing remark. Our final question for the audience, though, is this also comes from Leyu, and it's is the TCO of refactoring higher than that of replatforming, and what is the project timeline? Omar, can I ask you from your experience on this one, refactoring versus replatforming, which one has the higher TCO?
Well, I think that in this case, I need to provide a consultant answer, because of course it depends by the context and by other several factors, of course. Again, here, I think that as the colleagues were mentioning, there are several solutions that can be applied. My suggestion here would be in order to select the most appropriate approach would be to think about the risking policy and how to apply the strategy minimizing and affording the minimum risk that's possible.
Thank you. Very good. I think we've run out of time now, so if I can ask you to give a final word of advice to our fictional IT director come CIO, what would you advise them to do, Thilo? They're sat there, they've got a mainframe, they haven't integrated. What would be the right thing to do?
Conscious of time, I would say talk to us.
Okay. Omar, your final word. What would your advice be based on your personal experience?
Well, start the journey with a POC approach.
Okay, very good. Stephan.
Tackle the issue actively, even if your business doesn't ask explicitly for it.
That's good words. Thank you. And Jürgen, to close us off today, what would your advice be?
Start now. I mean, very often, first steps are actually self-financing. So starting now is, I think, what you should do.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. All of our panelists, I think, have shared some wonderful insights with us today and some very, very valuable knowledge. So thank you very much indeed for your participation. I'd also like to thank the audience for being with us today and also for all the questions that they have mailed in. Unfortunately, we haven't had time to get to a lot of the questions, so I would mention that there is a virtual exhibition where I believe you will be able to get the questions answered today. So if you want to participate in that, I'd very strongly encourage you to do so. I'd now like to hand over to Tobias Braun. And Tobias is the head of technical pre-sales at LzLabs. And Tobias is going to take us through, I guess, following our conceptual discussion of what a software-defined mainframe might deliver. He's going to take us through the full reality of what it looks like and what it does. He is going to provide a demo of the software-defined mainframe and show how that delivers the freedom of choice, the agility, and the upcycling for applications that we have discussed here today. So once again, thank you very much, Mike, to the panelists, and Tobias, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Julian, for that great introduction. Wow, this has been a really amazing conference so far. But I can promise you, this was just the warm-up. From the past panel, we have learned how BPER Banca uses the software-defined mainframe to reduce its time to market when delivering new products. We have learned how other customers benefit from using the software-defined mainframe. But within the couple of next 30 minutes, I'm going to show to you how SDM works, how it looks like, and how it feels like to work really on a running and up and running system. But before we start, please let me introduce myself. My name is Tobias, and I'm the head of the technical pre-sales team here at LzLabs. And I can tell you, I'm really proud and looking forward to talk to you this afternoon, lining up with people like Jürgen, Omar, Thilo, and of course, Corinne and Julian. Actually, Corinne was the one who called me 2 or 3 months ago, and she asked me, hey, Tobias, can you do the technical demo on the event? But you also need to do me one little favor. Don't be technical. And I was thinking like, well, a technical demo, showing a technical solution and don't be technical, that's quite a challenge. But I started to think about this, and I thought about how I would represent the current situation of mainframe customers in the year 2022. And I came to the following conclusion. So you really might ask yourselves now, is that guy crazy? Is he going nuts? Is he really referring a mainframe to a coconut? Well, yes, maybe I'm a little bit crazy, but let me explain a little bit. Mainframe customers have something that's really, really special. And this is called upward and downward compatibility. This means that there are applications that are running or were developed for old machine types of a mainframe and that are still running on the newest machine types. So it's actually not unusual to see applications at the age of 20 or even 30 years that are still running and that are still being maintained and developed. So literally, the application has been growing with the company. And whenever there is a new business process that needs to be covered, this is going to be implemented into the software and into the application. So all in sum, if you see and look at the business functions, this is something that makes you as a company unique. It's your company's DNA running in those systems. And this is what I'm trying to picture with the pulp and the coconut milk sitting inside that shelf. On the other side, of course, looking at the long period of time, it's also kind of obvious that the application has become more complex. It has more dependencies to the system using system functionalities. So it's actually limited by the natural borders of the shelf, looking at the coconut again. So customers who think of leaving the mainframe need to consider how they can move in a sustainable way the valuable assets, so the business logic, out of that environment and bring it over to a new modern architecture running on x86. So the basic questions at hand is, how can we extract the valuable asset sitting inside the mainframe and move it over to the new x86-based architecture with a limited amount of risk? And the answer can clearly be given by LzLabs and the software-defined mainframe. So what is the software-defined mainframe? The software-defined mainframe is an environment that allows your applications and the related data to run on an x86-based architecture in completely the equivalent way as it was doing on the mainframe world. And the way how we are doing this is we are extracting the pulp or the milk sitting inside that coconut. We are getting rid of all the dependencies to the shelf and the limitations. And without a change, we are moving this valuable essence over to the new world, into the new architecture. And as soon as your application is now running on that new architecture, it is kind of benefiting from all the assets and tools available in the new world. And this actually is the first step of our modernization journey. This is actually the binary rehosting or the modernization of the infrastructure. So I'm going to show to you how SDM looks like, how it feels like to work with the system, and hereby I'm using the web interface. Besides the web interface, it's also possible to use the command line or even our REST APIs, but for that demo, I will use the web interface. When you log into the welcome screen, it's completely equal to what you are doing on a mainframe because you will reuse your existing TSO user and password, and then you are presented to the welcome screen. On the welcome screen, you have kind of the, let's say, highlights of the SDM environment. So you see jobs, which shows the active started tasks that are still in the status running, and it shows batch jobs that have ended, and you see the return codes. On the right side, you see the active regions, so online regions, and from here you can see that I have 3 active online regions running, and you have the relational subsystem, so our DB2-like environment with the name WDBS. The first perspective and the way how to navigate through the system is using here the job perspective. So we see the jobs here, and as I said, we see the started tasks, and of course, we see the batch jobs that have been submitted, and we can see the return codes. So I don't want to get into the detail anymore here, so let's get over to the next perspective, the datasets perspective. And this is also, that's quite similar to a mainframe environment because we use first level qualifiers, second level qualifiers, and so on and so forth. So if I'm, for example, searching for a member that sits inside the folder or dataset WinQA BC demo, I can change or use a filter and look maybe in the JCL dataset. And inside that JCL dataset, I'll have a member that is named batch Java. And as you can see here, it is JCL, similar or completely equal to what is used on the mainframe. And this JCL kicks off a job that at the end cubes and squares a number and passes a name. You can see that here with the highlights I have done. So it's actually passing the number 4 and a name. To submit the JCL, I have several options. The first one is using the web interface and click on Submit as Job. The second one is, of course, using the REST API. And the third one is kind of connecting to a scheduler that is automatically scheduling that application. So for that demo, I will submit the batch job. I'll accept. Go back to the jobs perspective. And here you see that job ran. It has a return code of 0. And the result of that job is actually shown here in that spool R dataset where it says, "Hi Coconut, here's your demo. Based on number 4, we have 64 and 16 as a result." So a really easy program. But for the demo, I think it's well enough. The next perspective to have a look at is the LZ Online perspective. So on my system, as I said, I have 3 environments. And I am now connecting to one of these environments using a 3270 emulator. So I click on Open, and I click to the IC07 environment on the SDN. So say Connect. And here I'm presented to my online screen. I'll enter an application name and, of course, a transaction name. And voila, here we are presented to a BMS map. And this small application just tells me the ISO country code that is listed in a VSAM file. But as you remember, I should not be too technical. The beauty of that is that this is exactly a screen that would also be used on a mainframe application in the same way. Other perspectives inside that SDM environment is the hierarchical perspective for IMS databases, the relational perspective for administrating the DB2 or relational database environment. And for security, we have LZ Vault, where all of the ACF2 or RUC-F security definitions are stored, and you have the same security mechanisms as on the mainframe. On the system side, there is an option that is named Migrate, where you can see all the migration files that have been exported from a mainframe. And if I click on one of those files, I can see the data sets here on the bottom that are included in that migration file and that then can be restored and received into my system. And this is how migration works. We export things from a mainframe, we import it again to the SDM environment. So far, we have talked about the interface of how to work with the software-defined mainframe. But besides, let's say, the commercial perspective, there's also the question often raised like, hey, what's the difference here? Because people still have to administrate the transaction monitoring solution. They have a DB2 or relational database environment to take care of. So what's actually the usage of this interface? The answer of that question is clearly nothing changes. Even if you have managed to get your way from a mainframe to the x86 world, someone who's working with a mainframe will quickly be familiar with this new environment. And even better, as we are now on the x86 world, we have access to people from universities who are used to work with x86-based technologies. And they will quickly learn about this technology because they don't have to take care about the complexity on the mainframe architecture in parallel. So the valuable knowledge that sits inside your employees, that sits inside your mainframe specialists and the application can now be passed over to the next generation. And this is what we call sustainability. So let's do the next step. We have so far talked about the binary rehosting as a first step of our modernization journey. But what about development? Customers who are running on the software-defined mainframe need to be able to further develop and maintain their applications. And we offer them a solution based on Eclipse. This is named LZ Workbench. And by using LZ Workbench, you can still write, adapt, and maintain your COBOL, PL1, and even assembler sources. And at the end, you can do the compiling, because we also offer the compilers so that you can put on the binaries to the SDM environment at the end. And again, you are now on the x86 world. You have various options. You have various tools available, like Jenkins, Docker. You have tools like JIT to build up an automated build pipeline, to do continuous integration, continuous delivery, DevOps, whatever you want, as you are now free in that new world. You are even allowed to spin up SDM in a virtualized environment to have dedicated system integration SDM LPAs for doing integration tests. And this is actually what BPER Banca is doing. So it's amazing. This is really working. And within the next demo, I will demonstrate to you how LZ Workbench looks like. We will submit, again, the batch job that cubes and squares a number, and there's a terrible mistake inside that batch job. And we will debug the session to fix the error. So let me get back to my screen again. You can see here the basic interface of LZ Workbench. And Eclipse is based on perspective and views. So a perspective is actually the screen, the whole screen you are seeing here. And a view is that small little window, for example, that says Project Explorer. So all of your development projects can be managed inside that screen, or it can be managed by a SCM system that is connected to your Eclipse system. In the main window here, you have the editor, and you can see here I have a JCL. So this JCL, again, kicks off a job, cubing and squaring a number, and I'm passing over the number 4. So I click Run As, launch the JCL, and then the job is being sent to SDM, and on the bottom here on the left corner, you will see the result of the job where it says, "Hi Pineapple, here's your demo. Based on number 4, we have 64 and 16 as a result. So why the hell is he saying pineapple? I want to be a coconut, not a pineapple." So let's look at the code. This is not feasible, right? This is not the way how it should look like. I have now opened the COBOL source, and you can see here on the right part, it's the outline view. And this outline view is kind of an overview of your source code. And the important thing I want to look at is the procedure division. Inside the procedure division, we have a paragraph that is named Hello Coconut. So this sounds really suspicious. So I'm clicking on that paragraph, and well, there's something like, hey, string, here's your demo. So here's the part where something is written out to the console. So here I think the error is going to be. So I'm setting a breakpoint, going back to my JCL, and say debug as, and kick off the LZ Workbench debugger. So this is going to take a few seconds until the engine is going to start, because it's working remotely. So we are going to present it to the debugging view right now. And we can see it's stopping at that breakpoint. So let's have a look at the current variables. So I go on the right side under variables. And here under working storage area is a variable named welcome, where we have WS hello. And here it's the hi pineapple variable. So here's my mistake. Here's actually what went wrong. Okay, I now know what variable I have to change. So I stop the debugger. I go back to my source code. So this is the variable that has the mistake. So let's see how that variable is defined. I click on that variable, and here you can see hi pineapple. Well, no, it's high coconut. I'll save and compile and deploy it to my SDM. So this is all shown here at the bottom. So now the program has been compiled and deployed on the software-defined mainframe. And if I resubmit, look at the spool. Yeah, now it's working. Hey, Coconut, here's your demo. Wow, absolutely fine. Really fast fix for that solution. Perfect. Okay, so let's get back to the next topic. So far, we have covered the first step, the binary rehosting. We have covered how LZ Workbench looks like, and we have fixed a terrible error. And the next step is how can we modernize the application that now is running on the software-defined mainframe. And here's a really important message. We don't see SDM as the end of your application lifecycle. We see SDM kind of the bridge technology that enables you to recycle your valuable asset on a new platform and open it up for modernization that is completely available and free on the x86 world. And I'm now talking here by the examples of real customers. So the first example is the microservice example. So the customer I was talking about, or I am talking about, has one application running on a mainframe and he wants to get rid of that. The idea is to get that over to an SAP system. The way the customer did it in the past was he tried to completely rewrite that application in SAP. So I'm talking about a part chain application, so a manufacturing company actually. But he failed 2 times because, as I said, a application is really complex. It has really valuable assets inside of it, and rewriting this from scratch is kind of a high-risk approach. So the way the customer is doing it is, as a first step, he's rehosting this application on the software-defined mainframe. Therefore, he has no costs, so 60% cost savings compared to when running on the mainframe. And the costs he's saving can now be reinvested in modernizing the application. And what he's doing here, he's cutting down the monolithic application into small junkable bytes, so-called microservices. And these microservices can then be consumed by the SAP system, which kind of uses all the standard functionalities that are quickly available in such a system. So the beauty of it is here that you can consume the valuable functions sitting inside your existing application as a microservice, and you have the standard functionality sitting inside the SAP system. So you have an up and running system already. And if at one point of time you want to get rid of that microservices, you can step by step move all of these microservices into that SAP system, and you don't have the legacy part anymore. So this is the microservices example. Let's get over to the next one, Java modernization. If at some point of time you decide to say, hey, I don't want my applications to be written in COBOL or PL1 anymore, you also have the chance to do a gradual and step-by-step modernization to Java. And here is another unique selling value of the software-defined mainframe. And this is, we can make Java applications interact with COBOL or PL1 applications sitting inside the software-defined mainframe. And the way how we do this, and sorry, Corinne, it's again a little bit technical, we have Java native interface, so JNI, and we are encapsulating all the C functions of the software-defined mainframe in a Java method, so that a Java application sitting outside the software-defined mainframe can maybe call a COBOL program. And using this technology, you can step by step extract modules out of your mainframe environment and bring them to Java, and you still have a complete operational environment. So all in all, these are some of the options you have when you're running your applications on the software-defined mainframe. And this is, as I said, our 3-step-based modernization journey. We have covered in my presentation how the binary rehosting works, how it looks like as the first step. We have seen how we can do modern development using LZ Workbench, the compilers, how we can spin up maybe a DevOps, continuous creation, continuous delivery scenario, and at the end, how we can modernize the application targetedly on the SDN. And this is everything I wanted to show to you today. But of course, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. And we will be really happy if you join our booth. If you join the booth where our salespersons are sitting to have a conversation, if you join the booth where we will do a really technical demo, so not showing coconuts, really going into the bits and bytes, and I'm really looking forward to see you there. And of course, please join the booth where Accenture is and have a great time here. So let's grab a coconut drink now. Have a great time. Thanks for being here. It was a real pleasure. Thanks a lot.